You could take pretty much any of the Edenians in Mortal Kombat at random and end up with an interesting competitive story of mechanics, varied tier list placements, and fun tournament stories over the years. One Edenian in particular I've always wanted to cover for this reason is TANYA, typically some form of traitor in every game she starred in, whether she served Shinnok, the Deadly Alliance, Onaga, or Mileena, with a super necessary part to play in the game's stories. Mechanically, TANYA has more to offer than interesting lore alone, always considered a decent character at worst, and at best has been absolute top-tier material. TANYA has had her fair share of tournament success historically. Welcome to a competitive history of the one and only TANYA. We start today's video with her very first appearance, which was Mortal Kombat 4. She's got a decent selection of moves, an understatement in fact, and is said by many to be one of the game's absolute strongest characters in the tier list. Some even say number one, which is not an outrageous claim because she's incredibly powerful. Once again, MK4's normals and combo strings are universal, so you don't really need to dive into those too much, besides the fact that some of them look different, which might allow for slightly different conversions and stuff. But in this game, it's all about both the special moves and the weapon a character has that can determine how powerful they are in the game's meta. And TANYA has all of the above, on top of being one of the game's smaller characters, which is a massive advantage for anyone. The first thing to cover are the fireballs. She has a straight, grounded fireball and an airborne version. Both are fast, with her air version being especially useful as she can whiff buttons into it, which creates a bit of a defensive wall as the opponent comes in. You can sidestep this, of course, it's MK4. The other two specials are where TANYA comes into her own though. The split kick is incredibly fast and an amazing tool to end combos with. It's often a great way to hit that max damage counter because it goes so far and has such good startup speed. The big move to cover here is the low drill kick. This is the miracle move that makes TANYA as powerful as she is, as it is, by no exaggeration, the ultimate combo tool. It launches and allows for follow-ups, it can be used after a launch to continue combos within the hit limit, it will pick up those random jump kicks that you land into a full combo, which most characters can't do, and the speed alone makes it a punish for certain moves and normals as well. This drill, when mastered, is an absolute nightmare, because the threat of it is always there, whether she's converting into it, anti-airing, air-to-airing, it is just multi-purpose, and it could be the best move in the whole game. The final thing to cover is her weapon, which is a range tool. This boomerang combined with her already good projectiles pushes her over the edge, because TANYA is truly a character that can keep away or rush down at will. She's multi-purpose and deadly everywhere on screen. Couple her small size and the fact that her sweep is almost unpunishable, TANYA lacks any significant weakness who hits max damage easily thanks to drill, has amazing punishes, whiff punishes, conversions, range, rushdown tools. There's a reason most MK4 players put her at the top of their tier lists. For a first appearance, she made one hell of an impact. TANYA's next appearance would be in Mortal Kombat Deception, where she allies with the Dragon King, Onaga. Not really by choice though, as it does say in her bio, the choice was allegiance or death. Mechanically, TANYA is pretty strong in this game too, although nowhere near her top tier appearance in MK4. Most people that play, or played, Deception at a high level, have her in their mid-tier placement. She gains invisibility in this one, and many say that she has the best use of this invisibility than anyone else in the roster. And the thing that really pushes her apart is that she has the best low attacks in the entire game. Special-wise, her old school attacks return, where she has her grounded projectile, the drill kick, and the flip kick all come back, but her air projectile in Deception is this weird version where she goes into the air to do it, making it mega slow and, truthfully, not that worthwhile. The invisibility is where it's at, for reasons I'm about to cover right now. The first hand-to-hand is Menace, which isn't really the hand-to-hand you want to be using. Most of the normals are so-so, although her down 4 is quite good in this stance, but ultimately it is the other hand-to-hand that you want to use if you're not in weapon stance. Why? Because the Yue Xuan, I'm really bad at pronouncing these, sorry, her stronger buttons exist. The reason for it is the existence of those incredible lows that I mentioned earlier. Her down 1 is a really fast poke that can lead into a sidestep, another poke, a throw. I mean, the recovery is so fast that it gives you a lot of options. Her down 3 is pretty good too, but it is the down 4 in this stance that really stands out. This low is incredible as it's fast, has really long reach, and importantly has mega fast recovery, even being backdash cancelable for less recovery still. Backdash cancelling being a technique deception would be the final game to feature. Standing 3 is a mid with a number of follow-ups, which means the mix-up between low poke or standing 3 is a decent one. Even more decent if she's invisible, which is a bit of a nightmare. Finally, it's her Kobujitsu weapon stance that does impressive damage for the most part, and it has a number of nice options or buttons. Her 1 or 1-1 are both mids, which offer a mix-up between her mids and her low down 4, which is good for a low attack in weapon at least, and her back 2 offers a full string that does great damage and works as a tidy little punisher. She's quite unsafe on her mid options in general, so enforcing this mix-up of low and mid is important regardless of stance. The big thing TANYA does in Deception alone is capitalize on the OTG system. Anyone that recently watched my Noob Cybot video might recognize this throw, as TANYA's is identical to Noob's, which means picking people up in the corner works the exact same way, giving TANYA devastating damage if she throws you here. TANYA was far from the safest character in the game, but her invisibility combined with her low and mid game made her somebody that you did have to respect, but nothing about her screamed broken in the same way the top tiers of Deception would. TANYA could get the job done, but she did very often sit in that mid tier for most Deception players. This game's online back in the day functioned very differently to the online that we now know with modern fighters, so there's always a discussion to be had over old tier list placements based on mostly online play, but offline, the opinions remained pretty much the same with TANYA, and I want to say thank you very much to both Boos and Dayrax from the community for helping me fill in the blanks for this episode. Deception was not my biggest game knowledge-wise, I will admit. Now, TANYA would once again be playable in the next 3D installment, which was Mortal Kombat Armageddon, with the exception of Deception-specific stuff being removed, like the throw OTG against the wall, which meant that she couldn't do that anymore. TANYA is completely preserved in this one, gameplay-wise, with some upgrades that really helped her out in a game that had a lot of things stripped down from previous 3D titles. Her most important hand-to-hand stayed with her, with Ziran Men being given to Rain this time over. This was excellent to keeping her gameplay the way TANYA players would have wanted, as the low pokes remained completely intact, her down 1 still being fast on recovery, and her down 4 remaining completely godlike. A major change she received in this game was the ability to simply perform her projectile while jumping. She still has the weird version where she goes up and shoots it, but Instant Air Fireball completely invalidated the built-in jumping version. Jumping in Armageddon was far more powerful than previous 3D games anyway, as you're a lot more mobile with them here, and having this air projectile was excellent. In Kobujitsu this time over, her full back 2 1-1 up 1 string would for some reason receive a damage buff and do 42%, mainly because the back 2-1 on its own does 31%? What? On top of all this, TANYA's standing 2 paths into the various weapon strings and attacks from Deception actually do remain in Armageddon. They're just not listed in her move list. It actually means that she has a lot more ways to go into weapon stance than most characters, and allows for a bit more freedom because of it. Her weapon air infinite path is an easy one, but it really isn't needed, as her grounded combo options are fine and plentiful. She does gain a new one, which begins off the standing 3 mid, This is very important because it just lets you turn this mid-attack into more damage than you could get for the mix-up in Deception. There is one nerf she deceived in Armageddon though. In Deception, if you go invisible while Kobujitsu is equipped, everything vanishes, including her weapon. In Armageddon, the weapon is still visible, which is obviously a severe nerf as her mix-ups are no longer unseeable in this stance. Weird, yes, but it does fall in line with everyone else. Reptile and Noob, for instance, also have this issue in the game. Now, Tanya is stronger in Armageddon than Deception, as her basic game plan remained completely, but she has better fireballs thanks to the air fireball, and she has the strongest application of invisibility thanks to her buttons and mobility. And her Kobujitsu does massive damage for no effort. There's a lot of weaker characters in this game, and Tanya is not one of them. She sits in a solid upper mid category in most people's tier lists. And now, it's definitely time for Tanya's most notorious appearance, which was Mortal Kombat X. We have a lot to dive into here, that we can discuss the variations and how she fits into the final meta of the game, where we have players like Revit Leafing, for example, still making it work in tournaments and exhibitions, because Tanya is still a very good character. But it's her reign of terror in previous patches that we need to go into for the competitive history. Tanya as a character sports 3 good variations that are all a little bit different. Her base moves are plenty, as she has the drill, the flip kick, air versions of these moves which offer a mix-up, a teleport attack which on meter burn launches because she can cancel them into air specials. She has a lot going on here, however, with the variations. Pyromancer is the zoning variation, where she gets the projectiles, different angles to throw them. Her air projectile will change her air movement as well. The many ways that she can throw these make her zoning some of the strongest in the final version, in my opinion, because it's a combination of repositioning and space control. She has this purple dust attack which will cause an explosion if any of her fire moves connect, so basically this variation is short and snappy damage, really good keep away, and wonderful backwards mobility. Kobujitsu changes a bunch of her normals where the entire variation is built around her old weapon stance from 3D. She can throw one of them forward, which is a fast, decent projectile. Meter burning that will return it and allow for follow-ups. A sort of dive bomb attack, but most notably a wrecker, where you have different follow-ups. This wrecker sequence is the bread and butter of her combos here, on top of the pressure game as well. We can dive into this in a bit because it was very different back in the day. Finally, Dragon Naginata sports another weapon, one that you might not have expected when she was brand new, but I do think there was always this idea of giving her this weapon instead of the Kobujitsu. In old promotional material for Deception, she can actually be seen using one of these, so I don't know, perhaps this was always on the table at some point. Either way, it's got really good range on it, and on top of gaining some new strings and enders, she can go into this kind of hop animation which hits overhead. It's definitely her most unusual variation, but the armored reversal it has is a damn good one for the final patch, and it's kind of the specialist's variation for an already specialist character. I used to love watching this in high level, and I still do whenever Revit Leafing plays it. Now, the Tanya we have right now is nowhere near the one that we used to have, okay? She's really strong in the game at the moment, and all 3 variations get used for different matchups. You can still watch top-level Tanya play thanks to the ongoing content from the likes of Destroyer or maybe Unbearable Skills, so you can definitely get your fill here on YouTube, but because this series tells the story of the characters, Tanya in MKX was mostly well known for being one of the most overpowered characters we had ever seen in competitive Mortal Kombat. Quick side note, it turns out that even for 2015, finding patch notes is actually really hard. The official WB Games website notes aren't there anymore, and it's proven almost impossible to sift through all of the old Test Your Might threads. So although some of them are intact, mostly the original changes, other changes to Tanya have had to be found through community reaction and forum posts about the changes. So I am sorry if I can't be really specific with what exactly changed across MKX before MKXL launched. The first offender was her teleport. which, remember, was a universal move. Originally, this teleport was invincible, including the meter burn version, and 7 frames of startup if my memory is correct, making it at the time by far the best reversal in the game and impossible to react to. Not to mention, regular teleport was amazing anyway, so it was extremely abusable. Her ability to cancel into jump-ins from it, the recovery of the move, all of these things would receive significant changes after her release. I believe 10 frames of delay would be added, which made teleporting into jailing jump-ins and stuff no longer work. The ability to cancel this teleport was pretty much instant on release, but this too would be nerfed in patches to be slower. So the first instance of TANYA that we'd see was a total teleport fest with no neutral in sight. The notorious CEO 2015 Top 8 in Florida, where we'd see TANYA an absurd amount to the dismay of both the audience at home and the live crowd, who didn't really have an amazing time watching it. Although you could actually hear the crowd counting the number of teleports used in the Sonic Fox vs. Rio matchup. Even with the changes to teleport, TANYA would be an absolute menace, mostly due to the Kobajitsu variation. The armor that she had, the plus frames that she could put forward, the fact that she gained meter and did really good chip damage would all contribute towards a character that was a nightmare up close. And if your character had bad armor or slow pokes to challenge, you were pretty much done for once she got in close, something she could do easily thanks to her movement and advancing buttons. EVO 2015 was a real standout of that to me, not because I got bodied by MIT in the top 8 or anything, I promise, but because TANYA was running rampant throughout that entire tournament, where the amount you had to beat to progress through that bracket was kind of insane. EVO 2015 had about 1,200 people in attendance, so you can imagine the pick rate of TANYA through that bracket. I almost lost to a Pyromancer in winners off stream, but clutched it out after the first game. Go me. Watching back this top 8 makes me really sad, because I forgot that Quan Chi's missing armor bug was in this build. The spell was all I had to try and win the round, and I got jump kicked out of it! Throughout the first year of MKX after TANYA was added, she would receive changes to her chip damage, her meter build, her armored attacks, pretty much everything, and would fix by fix somewhat normalize the character, but she was always dangerous, and especially in 2015 was possibly the most picked character in all of competitive play before Alien came out and completely stole her thunder. There was definitely a new Menace when MKXL launched, thanks to Alien. But if we look at all of the grassroots fighting game tournaments across North America and everywhere else, TANYA was always picked by many players. And that's not even including the ESL Pro League, where TANYA was seen every week, constantly. It was a real problem. Like I said at the start though, by the end of the game, TANYA is still a very strong character, but belongs mostly to the specialists. All 3 variations are good and offer a variety of options for the different matchups, but she will never be the complete powerhouse that we saw in her debut year, where she was one of the most overpowered characters our community had ever seen. TANYA hasn't made an appearance since then, but you know how it goes with Mortal Kombat. With whatever game comes next, whenever that may be, there's always a chance that we'll see her again with new stories to tell. Thank you all so much for checking out this episode, and thanks as always for telling me what characters that you want to see. Make sure you check out my other videos, hit the notification bell for all of my future videos to come through, and maybe even consider supporting my Patreon. And I'll see you next time. Take care, everyone!